Alright, continuing here with part two of the road to the 30 Years' War. We left off talking about the power dynamics between England and Spain primarily on the eve of the Spanish Armada beginning to set sail in 1588 in order to invade England itself in retaliation for Queen Elizabeth's first ordered execution of her own half sister, a Catholic subject, under her reign. So in 1588, Philip is sending the bulk of his mighty Spanish Armada, probably the most powerful fleet in Europe at the time. They wanted to wipe out the smaller, outmatched English navy to set the stage for invasion, a proper invasion of England itself. Now, in order for all this to happen, which was kind of a logistical nightmare, Philip needed to get his navy, get his fleet into the English Channel to the Netherlands, where his army was in the middle of trying to put down a rebellion, a civil war between where his forces were supporting the Catholic forces against the Protestant subjects in the Netherlands. He needed to extract part or all of his army from the Netherlands, ship them across the Channel to invade England. Interestingly, Elizabeth, the Queen of England, had been supporting the rebel elements within the Netherlands for some time. Again, she was, supporting Protestant forces in their fight against the Catholics, and indirectly in their fight against the Spanish king himself, Philip II. So Elizabeth again shows a high degree of political savvy here as far as understanding the kind of realpolitik, the nature of power dynamics in Europe during her reign. In May of 1588, against some pretty sizable odds, the English fleet managed to defeat the Spanish Armada. Now, there were some reasons for this. First and foremost, the Spanish ships were colossal warships that were not easily maneuvered. They were funneled into a very small or narrow channel, the English Channel. Pitted against them was the smaller but quicker vessels of the English Navy. Ships within the Spanish Armada were typically, they would take cannon, they would simply wheel them on the decks, and they had, so that these cannon were not specifically made or constructed for naval warfare. They were highly inaccurate. In many cases, the ships had one type of caliber of artillery cannon and another type of caliber of shells, so that they couldn't fire they had the wrong ammunition essentially, which made their weapons useless by and large. So there was a tremendous amount of inefficiency on the part of the Spanish Armada. They were hampered by fire ships. These are ships that were set alight and simply sailed into the huddled masses of the Spanish Armada that were clustered close together because of the physical geography of the sea, of the channel itself. This is highly effective, especially when they were in port in the Netherlands, trying to, ferry troops or convey convoy troops, excuse me, across the English Channel. So it was an absolute mess. To make matters even worse, the Spanish Armada never invades England. They end up having to sail all the way around the English Isles. This is all the way into the North Sea, up around what is today, is Scotland, around Ireland to get back to Spain in the safety of their own ports. During that massive roundabout route, as they're making the turn around Scotland itself, they're hit with storms. The ships are torn asunder, they're sunk, they're scattered, and so as a result of this whole experience, the Spanish Armada is essentially destroyed. And this marks the zenith of Spanish imperial power. And that goes for the entire breadth of the Spanish kingdom itself, not only in Spain and Europe, but also for virtually all of its possessions around the world. Colonies in the Pacific, places like the Philippines, but also in the New World, in Central and South America. They're simply not going to have the resources available to recover from this catastrophe in 1588. They can't get the materials, the resources from one point to another, and where they need to go, because they have no fleet in which to move those resources around. As for the 30 Years' War itself, it's really going to be the Holy Roman Empire, the borders predominantly of what is today Germany, that served as ground zero for religious turmoil, once again by the 17th century. You recall that the emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor, was elected by 7 of the most powerful German princes. This was as a result of a negotiated kind of settlement where essentially ideally or previously, all German princes were participating in the selection of the Holy Roman Emperor. That proved untenable. It was replaced so that only the 7 most powerful princes, the ones governing the larger kind of districts within the Holy Roman Empire, were the ones that were going to choose the next head of or the next Holy Roman Emperor. So again, even here, the selection process is in the hands of the princes, or these 7 most pronounced and powerful princes. So once in place, depending on the personality of the emperor chosen, they might be almost achieving kind of a puppeteer type of status and nothing more. After the Reformation, 3 of the 7 princes had become Protestant. They were Lutherans. 4 remained ardent Catholics. By 1613, 2 of the 3 Lutherans had converted again from Lutheranism to Calvinism. So what this means essentially is that, at least in one regard, 2 of the 7 princes that are tasked with deciding the next Holy Roman Emperor, when the time came as a result of death or what have you, 2 of the 7 weren't even members of a religious faith that were officially recognized as a result of the Peace of Augsburg. Remember, it's only Lutheranism that was recognized as a legitimate religion, a Protestant religion. Compounded upon this, in 1617, you have Archduke Ferdinand becoming the King of Bohemia, which is one of these principalities that is tasked with deciding the choice of future Holy Roman Emperor. He was an Austrian Habsburg member of the Habsburg family. He was also a devout Catholic, and he immediately, within the borders of his Bohemian kingdom, he began curtailing the religious freedoms of Protestants. The very next year, in 1618, the um, in 1619, the Archduke Ferdinand is elected as the next Holy Roman Emperor. This choice, the advent of this selection, meant that now Archduke Ferdinand had the carte blanche to basically enforce a crackdown on Protestant populations, not only within the confines of his kingdom, the Bohemian kingdom, but also now he could impose that on the Holy Roman Empire itself as a whole. Protestants, as you might expect, refused to recognize his choice as emperor. They chose their own kind of rival emperor, and this context is going to trigger the 30 Years' War. Local discontent is going to escalate into a war that would engulf most of Europe. So it shows you just how volatile the circumstances were, not only within the confines of the Holy Roman Empire, but just how you know, how the potential that had for Europe as a whole. Catholic forces enjoyed early success. Philip IV of Spain, even though he's kind of licking his wounds after the debacle, the crushing and eradication of his Spanish Armada, he nonetheless is and remained an ally of Ferdinand II, who was Archduke Ferdinand, now the Holy Roman Emperor. Ferdinand, in fact, was Philip's uncle. So here you have Philip II is a Spanish Habsburg, Archduke Ferdinand, Ferdinand II, the Holy Roman Emperor, one and the same person, are a branch of the Austrian Habsburg family. They were successful in defeating Protestant forces within the Holy Roman Empire. In return, Protestants allied themselves with the respectable Danish kingdom. It was the kingdom of the Danes that marshaled forces, moving them southward into what is today northern parts of Germany. They wanted to, the aim here was to liberate Protestant communities, populations from Catholic rule. In retaliation, Ferdinand enlisted the help of one Albrecht von Wallenstein. Wallenstein was actually a lesser noble, and he was also a Protestant. This is where you get into kind of these very surreal kind of opportunistic examples of what was happening in the 30 Years' War. Ferdinand II, the Catholic Holy Roman Emperor, turns to this lesser noble, who actually is a Protestant, to command armies against Protestants that were attacking the Holy Roman Emperor. Seeing an opportunity to amass a respectable amount of wealth for himself, prestige, to carry through his own personal ambition, Albrecht von Wallenstein agrees to this. So religion has no real loyalty to it. That in this instance that basically opportunism is the driving motive here, not any type of religious loyalty to either being Protestant or Catholic. We're going to come across this again, so keep that in mind. Von Wallenstein saw this opportunity to basically advance his own position and his wealth. He would be allowed and engaged in the common practice of plundering any territory that his troops would occupy. And so, as long as that was the acceptable in the eyes of Ferdinand II, the Holy Roman Emperor, then the agreement would sustain itself. And indeed, that's exactly what the Holy Roman Emperor did. By 1629, von Wallenstein had succeeded in defeating the Danish king and the forces, the Protestant allies he had sided with. The very next year, in 1630, however, Gustavus Adolphus, the King of Sweden and also a Lutheran, entered into the 30 Years' War. He was in command of a massive 100,000 man army. It was currently deployed in Poland, where the Swedes had just managed to subdue much of Poland under Swedish control. So logistically, it was quite easy to pivot into supporting the Protestants in the northern portions of the Holy Roman Empire, which is exactly what Gustavus Adolphus did. He wanted to control the profitable trade routes in and around northern Europe and the Baltic region. And he was quietly but decidedly supported by the sitting French king at the time, King Louis XIII, who was Catholic. He was also supported, the Swedes were also supported by King Louis XIII's chief advisor, one Cardinal Richelieu. It was Cardinal Richelieu who was he was a ranking member within the Catholic within the papacy, and Cardinal Richelieu understood that France's secular interests, that is to say, the power of the French king, should be and were suspicious of Habsburg power. Now, if you look at the map on page 415 of your textbook, you'll see that France, should the Catholics, the Habsburgs in particular, succeed in putting down the Protestants being successful in this conflict, this would mean that the Habsburg Empire, the Holy Roman Empire on one side, the Spanish Kingdom on the other, would outflank the Kingdom of France. That there would be the potential of these two closely allied European powers would be on two of France's primarily three borders, which is something that was untenable to the French court, to the King of France, and to his advisor, his chief advisor really, Cardinal Richelieu. France would be nearly surrounded, and that was something they could not tolerate. So the logic that lay behind France's actually supporting Gustavus Adolphus and the Swedes, who were Protestants, was what Cardinal Richelieu called raison d'etat, which is French for reason of state. These are state matters that, in order to ensure the survival of the state. It's in its best interest to prevent the Habsburgs from succeeding in their war aims. This is the crux of modern national interests, and essentially kind of um, closely associated with it, national security, economics, international economic diplomacy. It is the modern context for all these various areas of international diplomacy itself. It is located, it really finds its traction and its first application here during the 30 Years' War. The Swedes end up winning convincing victories across in the northern portions of the Holy Roman Empire. But Adolphus himself was killed at the Battle of Lutzen in 1632, which was not only tragic but very costly. As a result of that loss, their charismatic leader, the Swedes were kind of set back on their heels. And in 1635, France officially enters the war, and enters the war on the side of the Protestants. So again, you have this Catholic monarchy entering in on the side of Protestant interests, and using the rationale, the raison d'etat, to justify that action. Fighting would persist, but French involvement marked the last and most significant turning point in the war itself. That really was just a matter of time before the Protestant forces just wore down through really acts of attrition the resolve of the Catholics to carry on the fight. Little question remained as to who would prevail. Now, throughout this period, there is in the Netherlands this ongoing conflict between Protestants and Catholics that had preceded the 30 Years' War. This is the kind of 80-year war, which is primarily a civil war between Catholics and Protestants in the Netherlands itself, that the King of Spain was preoccupied with. So this gets wrapped up into this broader narrative of the 30 Years' War as well. In England, you have, after Elizabeth I's death in 1603, you have a series of Catholic heads of state coming to the throne and trying to govern over a predominantly Protestant country. And that's going to lead to internal conflict, resulting in an English civil war. So England is on the sidelines fighting its own civil war while the rest of Europe is burning as a result of this 30-year war between Protestants and Catholics. So England is not going to participate in the larger war, but it is still suffering from the same kind of dichotomy, volatile dichotomy between Protestants and Catholics. That would continue into the 1650s within England itself, and with Oliver Cromwell and Parliament trying to exact its control or exercise control really over the English monarchy. We'll get more into that probably after our first exam here coming up in about a week from now. Nonetheless, turning attention back to the 30 Years' War, the tremendous size of these armies, and we're talking about armies numbering 100,000 or sometimes in excess of 100,000, meant that it was really only government bureaucracy. It was only the states themselves that could feed, equip, and field these armies. And even they had trouble, but they were the ones with the coffers, the money necessary to try and succeed in keeping these armies in the field, figuratively and literally. Uh, Oftentimes there would be a kind of a scorched earth tactics that would be deployed in order to make sure that armies were fed. They would simply just run roughshod over the countryside. They would seize up all the natural resources, food, livestock, whatever, in order to make sure that they were provisioned. Um, this would destroy entire villages and towns. Food and resources were hoarded. Um, they would destroy, these armies would destroy anything that they themselves could not consume or use. And this left the peasants, the civilians, destitute in many cases, homeless, hungry, impoverished. And this also led to a tremendous economic drain on state resources, as you might expect. Monarchs needed to raise great deals of great sums of money in order to equip these armies. In many cases, this would result in the raising of taxes, but in many cases, they were raising taxes on populations that had been already devastated and were already impoverished. More creative solutions included devaluing the currency, um, which would contribute to runaway inflation, which would hurt the poorest in society as well. So you can see that there were these crippling kind of side effects to this new style, this new scale of warfare that was beginning to be seen across Europe and had not been seen in Europe for centuries, really. It also meant that states, monarchs, were going to have to deficit spend. They were going to have to turn to the banking industry in order to fund military ventures. This kind of ties in a bit with what Niall Ferguson is talking about in episode 2 of his Ascent of Money series. At the end of it all, in 1648, you have the ratification of the Peace of Westphalia. These are actually a series of treaties that ended the 30 Years' War. What's interesting about the treaty itself and the negotiations is that delegates from all the major countries involved met and negotiated simultaneously. This was the first time something like this had happened. So this was multilateral, a multilateral negotiation that was taking place. It's also a modern kind of characteristic of treaty making or peacemaking, I should say, in today's world that we just take as kind of a natural event or without any type of notice or fanfare. Well, that modern that modern notion traces its roots back to this Peace of Westphalia as a result, ending the 30 Years' War. The peace treaty itself redefined the balance of power in Europe. France replaced Spain as the most powerful country in Western Europe. France acquired portions of the Holy Roman Empire, the Alsace region, which is basically the border region between what is today France and Germany. Would be a hotly contested region between those two powers as they began to dominate politics in Europe into the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. Sweden took control of some of the Holy Roman Empire's northern regions. Spain was forced to recognize Dutch independence, so the 80-Year War for Dutch independence was wrapped up in and resolved in this broader Treaty of Westphalia. German princes within the Holy Roman Empire could choose any religion for themselves and their subjects. The Holy Roman Emperor, or excuse me, within the Holy Roman Empire itself, Lutheranism, again, predominantly dominated in the north. Catholicism was dominant in the south, with pockets of Calvinist faith existing in the eastern portions of the empire. And again, it's this Treaty of Westphalia, the Peace of Westphalia, that is the cornerstone of modern diplomacy. Matters of state here came to dominate international affairs and decided political matters. So once and for all, it's the state that is ascendant over religious interests over the Catholic Church itself, which is a key turning point in the dynamic of decision making, really, in Western civilization in this case. So, in conclusion, just very quickly, Catholicism here seemed to learn lessons from the Reformation, but again, they were not really intent on any type of reconciliation with Protestants. They wanted to kind of close ranks and make sure that Catholics were adhering to the faith in a strict, very indoctrinated way. This is going to help sow the seeds for this perpetuated kind of animosity between Protestant and Catholic communities. There, which we can see expressed in the power struggles within places like England, and the lengths to which Elizabeth I, as Queen of England, is going to go to try and keep a balance of power in her hands as best as possible, not only from outside intruders or potential threats like Philip II in Spain, but also internally between Protestants and Catholics within England itself. But it's really where power was most contested that is going to serve as the spark leading to the 30 Years' War, and that is going to occur in the Holy Roman Empire itself, where you have an overarching kind of imperial figure, the Holy Roman Emperor, but most of the actual authority remains in the hands of local princes and their small districts that they govern directly. And this is going to lead to a costly, bloody, tragic war, stretching on or going on intermittently over the course of these 30 years, the first half really of the 17th century. But it does culminate in the Treaty of Westphalia, this document that is, again, the cornerstone of modern diplomacy. And that gets us pretty much to where we need to be as far as understanding the dynamics in Europe, Western Europe. The next lecture I'm going to focus on Russia, its modern foundations, and what was happening to it, the trials and travails it suffered leading up to about the same period of time, the mid-17th century, and also look at China and revisit China and Japan to get us to about the same period of time, the mid-17th century, as we begin to lay the groundwork for our first exam. I will be also posting a lecture, or not a lecture, I'll be posting information, a talk about preparation for that exam, helpful strategies for studying, and so on and so forth. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me and let me know if there's anything I can help with. I do need to get to um, the discussion questions. I'm doing my best to keep up with those. I made pretty copious, pretty thorough and regular comments to the first of the three questions posted from week one. So I'll be getting to the other uh, second and third questions later this week, as well as beginning to turn attention to the two questions posted from last week. So I'll be on the lookout for that. So that's where I'm going to leave things for right now, but we'll see you soon.